death of Dontre Hamilton is a tragedy for everyone involved. My decision today that criminal charges will not be issued against Officer Manny does not depreciate the very legitimate concerns raised any time a law enforcement officer uses deadly force against a citizen.
In the space of a few months, America's relationship with law enforcement has changed, and all for the worse. Cops now walk around knowing there are larger targets on their backs and chests. We're finding out how bad some of them are trained. And no matter where we lead this conversation to, it always comes back to a simple word: leadership. Let's welcome to MidPoint, President of the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund, former Assistant Director of the FBI with 30 years at the Bureau, Ron Hosko joins us today. Ron, thanks so much for being here today.
I'm happy to do it.
Ron, we have so much attention being paid at New York City right now. We'll get to that in a moment. But now we need to turn to what is going on in Milwaukee. A white officer there, Christopher Manny, said that there was a struggle with a 31-year-old black man, Dontre Hamilton. Turns out that the suspect apparently suffered from a mental illness. The officer fired a number of shots, killed him. The jury has looked at it. The grand jury, the federal prosecutor looked. They found no reason to follow further anymore. However, we're finding out now that the officer was not properly trained, and that's what really started this entire altercation. Doesn't this then lead us to believe that we're now at a time in our law enforcement history where officers have got to be trained better? There's got to be a better focus on that, because isn't that where it all begins right now, is the training that creates that trust to know that you're not just going to get stopped and knocked around by a cop who's having a bad day?
It does, Ed, and it points to, if you took notice of the Secret Service report just a few days ago, they made heavy references to training there as well, where the Uniform Division, their training in a course of a year could be counted in minutes, not hours or days. It's a challenge for law enforcement because training takes money. Training takes, while you take me offline to train me effectively, somebody else has to be doing my job. And that means budget, that means additional personnel potentially. As I said, the Secret Service report talked about a fourth shift. And I think it's a great idea. Training is something that everyone in law enforcement would embrace. It's critical to success.
Ron, how did we get this sloppy then? Because let's face it, I understand money is there, but the public doesn't want to hear that. What they'll think about is a cop, a bullet head who simply wants to go out and create trouble. We just saw a videotape today of an officer in one place in America who was allegedly drunk on the job. So where did we get so sloppy? Who allowed this to happen?
And, the reality is that police departments, law enforcement generally, is a reflection of society. Law enforcement is far from perfect. There are going to be personnel who are acting criminally, who are acting negligently, stupidly, foolishly. However, I think that the tone that's been set in the last few months, it has been the suggestion that all of law enforcement is corrupt, all of law enforcement is biased, stupid, poorly trained. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Okay, then is this something, because every time we talk about the need for law enforcement to improve, we hear from a lot of people, and rightly so, there needs to be more diversity. But is it fair to say that that is not the be-all answer here, that there's got to be more to it than that? Putting more black officers on the street isn't going to make things automatically better.
That's not necessarily the case. You see places like New York City where they have a very diverse workforce. And in our perfect world, we might think that the police department should perfectly mirror the population that they police and that everything would be wonderful. That's not necessarily true. Certainly what we need is smart police officers, those who have great communication skills, that can de-escalate a situation, that can talk subjects back from the edge, that can take the superheated air out of a situation and not make it worse. And that depends on communication skills and engagement. It may depend on language skills, depending on where you work in our country. But we need smart, trained, engaged police officers out in our communities.
Ron, I got about 30 seconds left, then we'll take a break, come back and talk more. But final answer in this segment here, are we getting to a point where we're going to need better oversight of police departments? I hate to use the word government oversight, but somebody who oversees these departments makes sure they're getting the money, but make sure they're trained and they don't make such sloppy mistakes.
I think that oversight, certainly in the federal ranks, is pervasive. It is heavy, coming from the FBI. There were layers of oversight both internally within DOJ and externally. So the oversight is needed and strong leadership is needed. And that's a good line and chain of command, running off police officers who don't deserve to be police officers.
All right, you hit on a point. We're going to follow that up in a moment. Stand by, please, Ron. After the break, we're going to turn to how law enforcement gains back the trust that is now in tatters, and we're going to talk specifically about this leadership issue and what happened in New York. And at 51 minutes after the hour, the MidPoint holiday gift to our loyal viewers. It's all right here where we question everything. Let's welcome back to MidPoint, President of the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund, former Assistant Director of the FBI, Ron Hosko. Ron, let's go ahead and turn to New York and New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio. Originally, he took some inadvertent shots or perhaps did not exactly build up his police department as he needed to in an original press conference. He's now in a verbal feud with the police union chief. He now is also coming out and basically still saying things such as blaming the media in a recent press conference with regard to what's happened in New York. We talk about leadership. Is it not fair to say that this is horrendous leadership from the mayor of a major city, and this is part of the problem indeed? When you've got a bumbler sitting at the top who can't go ahead and make the right calls, it filters down and hurts everybody.
It is absolutely part of the problem. I mentioned earlier communications. We need, great communication skills at all levels in policing and on all levels in our leadership. And what we've seen for months now has really been a failure of communication, poor communication, whether by design or inadvertently. And it has created this narrative that the country is hearing now. We heard it for 4 months, and the complete sentence was, white cop shoots unarmed black teen, period. And the story in Ferguson was much, there was much more detail to that story that finally was told. There's more detail to the Garner story. There's more detail to what's going on in New York, and you're not hearing that from our leaders.
Then I tell you what, Ron, I'm going to go ahead and take some of this on here from my profession as well, because I will agree with the mayor in some instances. I believe there are members of the national media and the local media here who play this up simply because they go ahead, they have an agenda, and this is what they want to do. So is it not fair to say that the media does bear a role in this? How we cover it and what we present to people is part of the problem, because people sometimes fall immediately for the first 6 words they hear and they don't hear anything in depth.
Right. We hope for a populace that, educates themselves, that is thoughtful on issues, that will dive a little bit deeper and ask questions themselves. But from my perspective here in the D.C. area, I have heard, as you have, for months, that sentence that I just stated coming from the radio, in the news, and on TV, and in much of the mainstream media. And people start to believe that that's the reality without looking for more detail.
All right,
and making their own judgments.
Then let's just take the media out of it for the moment here. How then do we start to at least repair this? Is it more officers on the street? Is it more black officers in black areas? What exactly is it? Because somehow we've got to get the law enforcement has got to get the trust of the public back. And honestly, I'll tell you right now, the way we're going, I don't see any way this is going to happen for years, perhaps.
Right. Ed, I hope and pray that most of the public sees law enforcement for what they are. That is, they're protectors, those who are working day and night to keep them safe, who are running into burning buildings, running into active shooter scenarios, and engaging in acts of heroism every day, doing a very difficult job. However, what we do need smarter police officers. We need more training. We need more engagement with our community at all levels, and that is public forums, individual officers getting out of their cars and walking on the street and knowing who they're policing, and trying to get the community back together and on the side of law enforcement and having a deeper appreciation for the work they do.
And in order to make the good cops shine out, when we see an intoxicated officer, when we see a cop who beats somebody up for no reason, don't we need the police unions on the side then and everybody on the side to say, you're fired, you're out, that's it? Wouldn't that then say something to America that we're not willing to sit and wait months for this to happen? You screw up, you're out.
Unquestionably, we need due process. Of course, every officer should be guaranteed that. We had a situation in Ferguson where the masses were ready to deny Darren Wilson any sort of due process or presumption of innocence. They wanted a tree and a rope They wanted a conviction the next day. And then when the facts become known, because of the false narrative that we've heard over 4 months and positions are hardened, then we have to somehow find a way to walk back from that and re-educate people who don't want to listen. It became very difficult over the last 4 months, but we need to take some steps forward together with the right voices.
I got about 40 seconds left here. There's a lot of cops right now who fear for their life. As I mentioned at the beginning of this interview now, people who are targeting cops. Would you see the feds getting involved, the FBI, a terror alert of some kind to start and work with local police departments to try and get down to the core and find these people?
The FBI is going to try to insert itself or involve itself based on actual intelligence. And so if they see threat streams coming together in an appreciable way, they will raise that across the law enforcement community. But I'm sure most in law enforcement have got the word. They have been watching Ferguson like all of us. They've watched the Garner situation. They see the protests, and they know that could be them. The police are under assault every day. 50,000 almost in 2013 reported to the FBI assaults on the police. So they know they're a target when they put that uniform on.
All right, Ron, I want to thank you very much for your comments. This is a conversation that we are going to continue here. I wish you a very Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year to you and your family. I'll look forward to the next time we talk.
Thanks, Ed. Same to you.
Take care. Break, and we're back with the next step on President Obama's legacy tour, and it involves Mother Nature.